Good evening, everyone, and great to see you on this important night, this particularly important subject too. Children seen and heard. As you'll have seen in part of the information that I've sent out, I feel passionately about this, and it's been a privilege over the last few weeks to meet Sarah through this medium, and also Felix. Sarah, of course, founded Children Heard and Seen in 2014 to address the lack of support she saw to children for a parent in prison, many of whom she had seen go on to offend themselves. For many of the charities earlier, Sarah's work was unpaid and driven solely by dedication to support vulnerable families. Well, she's supported tonight by Felix Tasker, who's also here, communications officer for Children Heard and Seen. It's going to be an extraordinary evening, one I'm sure that we will enjoy, and I hope you're going to find it interesting. So that's enough from me. Over to you, Sarah, and welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'm Sarah Burrows, as Steve said, set up Children Heard and Seen back in 2014. It is a charity that supports children with a parent in prison in their communities, and the focus is on the child and not the person in prison. So we just wanted to start with a really short film that sort of explains all the issues and everything about it. As the film opens, the screaming in the background is a 7-year-old boy that, in fact, we ended up supporting when the arrest of his parent happened. And then the film continues. But if we could just watch this for 10 minutes, it really does explain a lot of the issues.
Police! Police! Police!
Hello, Children Heard and Seen. James Otley speaking. How can I help?
I've been told I can't get any support as I'm no longer with the father of my children, that they're suffering.
I'm looking after my grandchildren as their father killed their mother.
My son's trying to get himself arrested. He wants to get sent to prison so he can see his dad.
We've had to move 200 miles due to vigilantes, and now we have no support network.
My husband offended against me, and no one will come to court to support me.
I don't know if you can help. My daughter is having nightmares. She thinks
I'm really worried because I need some help with explaining what my son's dad did.
Can you help? I'm worried my son is
flipping social worker went and told him his dad was in prison for touching people.
My daughter's mum is in prison.
And he's now scared if he touches
and
someone,
she thinks
he'll be
she's
sent
the
to
only
prison.
one with a
my
mum.
grandchildren.
My husband has just been sentenced.
My ex-boyfriend was on the front page of our local paper.
Social worker just
My
told me
daughter read it.
no one has come to speak
What do
to
I
me
tell her?
about what I need to
I'm
do.
just so scared to go back to our home.
My mum went to prison when I was 15. I was just about to sit my exams. I presumed this is when support services would step in. I wasn't open to children's services. Nobody came to support us. It was in the local newspaper. Our address, mum of 3 goes to prison, her name. So it was a really, really tough time for us.
My dad first went to jail when I was 10. Of course, that was like a hugely traumatic experience to happen to us as a family, kind of ripped our family apart. But what we didn't realise was it was the start of what was a life sentence for me and my brother and my mum. And me and my brother were just left to fend for ourselves, really. Like, for me, I had lots of, I guess, mental health problems and went off the rails because there was no one there to support us.
My dad went to prison when I was 7 years old. When my dad went to prison, it hit all the big newspapers, everybody knew. I was going to school and nobody was noticing changes in my behaviour, changes in my grades. Nobody picked up the bullying that I was suffering. There was absolutely no support.
As a young child, I experienced parental imprisonment. My father and my mother both spent some time in jail when I was very young. And then as an adult, when I had my own children, unfortunately their father ended up in prison and I done a short time as well. It was just an awful, awful time in our lives. And then Children Heard and Seen came along and made me believe that it wasn't my fault and it wasn't the children's fault.
Initially, when I set up Children Heard and Seen, what I was really concerned about was the statistic from a small piece of research about 65% of boys with a parent in prison went on to offend. So I thought that it would therefore be easy to be able to identify children and young people, that there would be some mechanism that someone would know who the children were. And I realised very quickly that we didn't know who the children and young people were that had a parent in prison. So with children with a parent in prison, Crest estimated there were 312,000, but that was an estimate. We don't actually know, yet we know how many Labradors are registered. And it seems a bit sad that we know more about Labradors than we do about children with a parent in prison.
Just identifying where are the kids that are in need so these kids don't slip through the net and end up taking their lives or end up in jail or end up going off the rails, to make sure that they're not going unheard and unseen.
Most people are surprised when we say that there are children and young people living on their own without an adult in the family home. Last year, in 1 month alone, we had 5 lots of children living on their own. We had an incident of one young person who was 15. He wasn't living on his own for weeks, he was living on his own for months. There was no gas or electricity, it had been turned off, and he was getting up every day and going to school and pretending that there was somebody at home.
These children should be supported. It's not okay for a 15-year-old not to have a parent there and to be punished for what their parent has done. These children need support.
A quarter of the children we support at the moment are only in Oxfordshire, the rest are in the wider part of the country. But that is because there's lack of provision up and down the country for children based in their communities wanting support.
One of my favourite things about supporting children heard and seen where I can is that I can come to their events and meet young people and families who've been affected but come in uniform. The more and more I saw of their work, the more I saw the benefit of supporting children when their parents go to prison, especially when police largely have a part to play within the arrest and investigation and prosecution of the individual. We're aware that it can cause harm, particularly with how children feel about the police and their trust in us, and Children Heard and Seen are there to support that, and that's the reason that I feel this model of supporting children in communities is so vital, and actually that's what needs to be more widely available. So I do get to see the actual support that children receive, and really importantly, it absolutely makes a difference.
You're stigmatised. You are stigmatised as there being something wrong with you or your family because your dad or your mum did something wrong. No, that's their life and that was their choice, not mine. I was targeted, I wasn't invited around people's houses anymore. I lost pretty much all of my friends, and also teachers stigmatised me too because it was in the media. So it really, really did hit every single aspect of my life.
We have had children who have had concrete blocks through the window, and they've had faeces through the door. They have watched their mothers being assaulted for their father's offences. They've also been assaulted themselves. We've had WhatsApp groups at school that if my father did what your father did, I would kill myself, and then being badly assaulted and not being able to then return to school. We have had children and families that have had to move to other locations. They've had to change their names because families are associated with the parents offending that has nothing to do with them.
My friend's dad said that she shouldn't associate with me because my dad was in prison, and it made me feel very upset because I am not my dad and I didn't make any of the mistakes he did. Since being with Children Heard and Seen, I have recognised the fact that it's not my fault. They've basically just helped me understand and process how I feel in a supportive way where it's positive and it's not negative.
The support that we offer is wide-ranging. We have children that don't know their parents in prison, so we design crib sheets with age-appropriate language, offence time, so it's very individual, so the parent, carer, grandparent can actually explain to the child why the parent is in prison. We have supported over 850 children and only 4 have offended. But it isn't about them offending, it is about breaking that intergenerational harm.
For me, those years when he was in jail was really, really difficult, even to the point that I took an overdose once and tried to kill myself. And when I look back now on the amazing work that Children Heard and Seen is doing, it kind of makes me feel like, wow, I almost died, like because of what I was going through, like I couldn't cope. I didn't expect it to still make me emotional now.
The voice of the child is the most important thing to us here at Children Heard and Seen. So it isn't about the relationship with the parent inside, it's about the impact of that parent's offending on the child and trying to reduce the harm that the child has experienced and giving them a safe space to actually process everything that's happened. So actually later on in life, they're not 10, 15 years, 20 years down the line, are still revisiting that trauma.
I just thought I'd be forever living a life of crime, surrounded by people that are in jail. And now I know that we don't have to live that life anymore. And we can be good people and be part of a great community. One thing that really helped me was one of the workers took me out and she helped me apply for some jobs. And now, 4 years later, I'm in my second year of university. And 5 years ago, I never believed that would be possible.
There needs to be more in place for children so they don't live throughout their adult lives carrying this trauma. People need to listen, there needs to be stuff in place. It shouldn't be up to charities, there should be statutory requirements for these children to be supported.
If I was looking back at myself, I'd say to her, you're going to be okay. But you shouldn't have had to go through all of that on your own. Somebody should have been there to help, to provide that safe space, that escape, that chance to sit down and be able to work through all of those emotions that you're going through, you know, to provide some help and some understanding. And, you know, to feel like you don't have to be an adult when you're 7. You should be a child. So yeah, I tell her, you're going to be just fine. But it's going to take a while to get there.
It isn't sustainable in terms of a charity picking it up. It needs to be going through either through schools' admissions that could be identified when you're choosing a school place, so it's self-disclosure. And schools are best placed in terms of universal services. Families that have a parent in the military are eligible towards pupil premium. We'd like to see something similar in terms of that with the children of the parent in prison. I love it that children are flourishing, achieving their potential, and just seeing the change that we can create by simple support for families.
If someone could have told us as a child, you're not bad, this isn't your fault, this shouldn't be happening to you, that could have been life-changing for us as a family.
Change needs to happen. We need to break that cycle. You need early intervention because a child, no matter what age, needs support when their parent goes to prison.
Richard Holden. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. A recent parliamentary answers to my WPQs talked of the positive impact that relations with families can have on prisoner resettlement. However, in a number of cases, particularly where there's been sexual violence involved in these cases, the prisoner has no contact with the family and their release is a hugely traumatic moment for those families and children. This is why I welcomed Labour's manifesto pledge to introduce a national identification system for children of prisoners as a vitally important measure. What is the government doing to meet this pledge and break the offending cycle across generations?
I know that identifying children with a parent in prison is important so that they can receive the support they need. Strengthening family ties remains an integral aspect of our work, which is why our family support workers help to re-establish appropriate family ties and help facilitate visits from prisoners' children. My officials are working closely with the Department for Education to determine how much more we can do in this space.
Savile Roberts.
Focus, we've always found, has supporting children with a parent in prison has always been on the person in prison. The child just as a tool really in terms of reducing the risk of parent offending. For us, it's just like what actually is in the child's best interest. So, Felix, can you sort of do the statistics and facts of some of the children, about some of the children we're currently supporting?
Thanks, Sarah. So we currently support 517 children with a parent, and these statistics on the screen here really illustrate why strengthening family ties is not only not useful, is actually can be quite dangerous in lots of situations. So as you can see, the top one, 20% of children we support are not allowed contact. So that is usually due to the offence type. For example, if it's a child sexual offence, they won't be allowed contact, and that is a cohort of children for which family ties is obviously not the answer. A further 20% of children we support don't want contact, and I'm not talking about visits here. This is support currently don't visit prison, and as you can see there on the right, 40% of children attacked at all. So it's kind of like a hidden cohort within a hidden cohort of children with a parent in prison who don't visit, whereas the focus is always, or can often be, through the lens of the offender, discourse in the media, and particularly in policy making from the government, like you can see in that previous clip, which was just last week, is often viewed through the lens of the offender, what is in the offender's best interest, and how contact can reduce offending for the person in prison. And as long as policy continues to be viewed in that way and not through a child-centered approach and what is in the best interest of the child, I really think that it will be difficult for children with a parent in prison to break free from these cycles of disadvantage that is often associated with having a parent in prison. So we're very, very adamant that government policy needs to take into account really what is best for the child, that no matter what the offence is, the child is completely innocent in all of this. And just one more statistic to really illustrate that point. As you see there, so over 500 children that we support as an organisation, over 65% of those families, the parent in prison is in fact an ex-partner. So strengthening family ties and helping facilitate visits is not such a black and white solution, and a lot of individual circumstances can be a lot more complicated and nuanced than that. And what's not on the screen there is, for over half, for 53% of the children we support, the child has witnessed domestic abuse in the home, and that is something that we believe often gets overlooked when discussing children with a parent in prison and talking about strengthening family ties, which is not the one-size-fits-all approach, which is sometimes viewed as.
Thanks, Felix. And the week that the general election was announced, I think it was the day before, Kerry McCarthy brought in a 10-minute rule bill. She absolutely covers the issues really well. So I'd just really like us to all watch this, please.
We now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require the Secretary of State to establish national policy guidelines in respect of children with a parent in prison, including for the identification of the children of prisoners at the point of sentence and for accountability for providing support to the children of prisoners and for connected purposes. I want to start by saying what this bill is not about. It is not about prisoners. There is some good and important work being done with prisoners and their families. We know there's often a value in maintaining family ties. It helps prisoners cope with their sentences and makes it less likely they'll reoffend when they're released. But this is not about them. It is about their children, some of whom will have contact with their parent in prison, many of whom won't. If the parent is inside for domestic violence or for sexual offences involving children, or indeed if the child was the victim of the parent's crime, there might well not be contact. Or if there's been a long history of criminal behaviour, of addiction, of violence, or if there just wasn't ever much of a family unit in the first place. So we don't start with the prisoner's well-being, we start with what is in the child's best interest. And we start from a difficult place because we simply don't know how many children have a parent in prison. We don't know who they are, where they are, who is looking after them, not in any kind of systemic way. They are the invisible children. As Sarah Burrows, the Chief Exec of Children Heard and Seen, who is here today, is a charity which does excellent work to identify, mentor and support children with parents in prison. As she's fond of saying, we know exactly how many Labradors there are in this country, yet we don't know how many children have a parent in prison. And that is why this bill is needed. I'm not going to prejudge now what a statutory mechanism for identifying and supporting children with a parent in prison could look like, although I do want to pay tribute to Sergeant Ross Massey of Thames Valley Police and the work he's led on Operation Paramount. And I do think that the unique child identifier number being proposed by Labour's education team might play a role. In 2019, CRESS estimated that around 312,000 children a year were affected by parental imprisonment. 17,000 of them, it would be their mother. The MOJ has now commissioned a BOLD, that's Better Outcomes Through Linked Data report, which will use government data to estimate how many children have a parent in prison, and those statistics will be released on 13th of June. There has been a lot of work behind the scenes to get us to this point, and I particularly want to thank the Honourable Member for Edisbury for his help, and the Children's Commissioner who has been backing this bill, and also for the various ministers who've met us over the years. But we need more than just a snapshot of how many children are affected. We need a mechanism so that at the point when an adult is sentenced to imprisonment, someone finds out whether there are any children involved, and someone is then responsible for making sure those children are okay. We know that at the moment this isn't always picked up. Sometimes the question isn't asked. Sometimes the prisoner doesn't want the authorities to know because they're worried the kids will be taken into care. Often schools have no idea. Children Heard and Seen see cases where children have simply been left to fend for themselves. I want to mention a few. A man went to prison for sexual offences. It was only after the house was targeted by vigilantes that a victim support caseworker found that his 15-year-old daughter was living there on her own. A criminologist conducting research in a women's prison was told by a prisoner that her 2 daughters were living on their own without any money for food and sanitary protection. A 16-year-old boy was arrested at the same time as his parents. He was released shortly afterwards and left to be the sole carer of his 8-year-old brother. An employer requested a welfare check after a woman hadn't shown up to work for 2 months. When the police went round to the address, they discovered her 15-year-old son living on his own. There was no gas or electricity, and he'd been getting up and going to school every single day without anyone knowing that his mum was in prison. Kinship carers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings often play an important role in stepping up when a parent goes to prison, and they need support to do so. But there's also a real risk children will end up living somewhere entirely unsuitable with people who will abuse them, neglect them and exploit them. More often than not, however, there is a parent, usually the mother, at home, but children can still be badly affected. One of the bloggers on the Children Heard and Seen website said, "We're not the victims, we are the collateral damage." There's an emotional loss, a sense of abandonment. There's perhaps a sense of injustice if they feel that their mum or dad has been wrongfully jailed. Or there's anger that their mum or dad has chosen to commit a crime, not caring what happens to them as a result. On a practical level, it could mean a big change in the family's financial situation, having to move house, move schools, going on to free school meals. Having to change your names and leave town altogether because it's been all over the papers that your dad is a sex offender, and I've met a family that happened to. And perhaps most damaging of all, it's the stigma and the shame of being associated with a parent's crime, being bullied at school, being seen as trouble by the teachers. As one mother said, "I'd moved areas because I felt like I was being watched all the time. People were talking and we were being discriminated against when it was not something that we've done. Kids are innocent and I've had to move schools, which has been more upheaval. It's just a nightmare." Children Heard and Seen use the hashtag #ItWasn'tMe. The child hasn't done anything wrong, but in so many ways the child is being punished too. The research from Crest that I mentioned earlier from 2019 found that children of prisoners are at risk of significantly worse outcomes than children not affected by parental imprisonment, including lifelong mental health problems and being involved in the criminal justice system themselves later in life. It's been suggested that 65% of boys with a parent in prison go on to offend. Others say that a child with a parent in prison is 3 or 4 times more likely to get into trouble. Although it is difficult to separate out other factors in a child's upbringing, the same factors that might have led their parent to become involved in crime, like poverty or family instability. What is clear is that by supporting and mentoring children, it is possible to break that cycle. I've met many adults from all walks of life, still deeply affected by the trauma of their childhood experience. We've met in this building, we've shared stories. What is striking is just how difficult it is for them to talk about it many years down the line. A few months ago, I watched a brilliant documentary, The Edge of Everything, about Ronnie O'Sullivan, whose father was jailed for murder when he was 17. And it was actually heartbreaking to hear him talk about it, to see the pain writ large on his face some 30 years later. He's #1 in the world, he's winning the world championship, yet he's still very much an experience that lives with him. Other celebrities have also spoken out about their childhood experiences. John Bishop was 6 when his father went to jail. He has said that visiting was a dehumanising experience. We were treated like cattle. The injustice my dad suffered had a massive impact on the person I am. Ramesh Ranganathan has also spoken out about visiting his dad, who was serving a 2-year sentence for fraud. It was horrific, he said. You just become numb to it. Those experiences definitely had a profound effect on me. Every child's story will be different. Some children who have a parent in prison now might be doing just fine, but the chances are that they are not. So we need to know who they are, where they are, how they are coping, who is looking after them, because they're not to blame, because it wasn't them.
And the next day, the general election was called. So obviously the bill didn't go through. But Labour in the manifesto did make a commitment to identify and support children. And what we're really concerned as an organisation is that time is going on. And children still are not being identified and supported. Children are still living on their own. It's a huge safeguarding issue. And children still are suffering in terms of the isolation, stigma and shame, and not being supported. And obviously there has to be consultation, having to look and see what is around, but we really believe as an organisation that we have the solution to the problem that Felix is going to just talk through now.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So this is our solution, and I appreciate that's a lot of text on the screen, but the most important thing is that this is a ready-made solution which doesn't require lots of time consulting and lots of time to implement. This is a solution using an existing data mechanism which is already in operation in certain areas of the country, and that's the Operation Paramount. So the first step, as you can see, children are identified from the point of imprisonment through Operation Paramount. Now, Operation Paramount is a project which was launched by the Thames Valley Police 3 years ago now. And put very simply, they cross-reference police data with prisons data to identify children of an offender. So when someone enters the prison system, they are now able to identify if that person has children. And that's it. It's very simple. It's just using existing data. And the data was previously only used to track a prisoner's movement through the prison system and eventual release. And this same data is now being used to identify family members left behind. So we have the capabilities all over the country, and their data mechanism is able to do that, to identify children as the first ever mechanism of identification and support for children with a parent in prison. Now, currently, the project is live in the Thames Valley area and in the West Midlands and in South Wales and some other areas. The identification works really well. You're able to identify children who have, when their parent is sent to prison, you're able to identify children. However, the model isn't perfect, and currently you have the police knocking on the door of families who have recently been impacted by parental imprisonment. Now, the police are not always the best agency to be doing that. If the police have recently arrested someone and then they're going back to the house a few days later, if the children have witnessed the police making that arrest, you can understand the feelings of distrust with authority and the police in general. So we don't believe the police are the right agency to be making that notification. Really, using this exact same mechanism, we would like to see that replicated all around the country, except the notification would go into schools. And that is based upon, as you can see at the bottom right, the very simply, when incidents of domestic abuse in the family home, the schools are notified. So we would like to use this mechanism to identify children with a parent in prison, and then to notify the designated safeguarding lead of the school. And as it says there, they would then be able to liaise with other members of staff and other external agencies if necessary, and that's crucial because it's not always necessary. That child might need some emotional support. The parent or carer might need some support in explaining to the child where their other parent is. But in the more serious cases, like Kerry and like Sarah mentioned, when a child is left living completely on their own without an adult in the house, that's when this mechanism would identify them straight away and be able to notify and liaise with the relevant agencies. So we have 6 accredited training packages, which will be ready to be rolled out to schools to train staff to be able to deliver the support in the school. We also have a model school policy, which is basically to encourage a parental imprisonment aware environment and to have one designated person for children with a parent in prison in the school. So this isn't something which schools would not, we don't have the resources to support schools with. We believe this is something, it's a serious safeguarding issue, and it's something urgent which requires attention right now. And using existing data mechanisms, this model could be replicated throughout the whole country so that every child with a parent in prison is offered support and that no child is left living completely on their own when their parent goes to prison. And the final one is the pupil premium funding. Obviously, it's very difficult for schools to present them with another problem without the attached funding to help support that problem. Children with a parent in the military are currently eligible for pupil premium funding. Now, children with a parent in prison currently are not. And there is the same element of parental separation, except with having a parent in prison, unfortunately, the levels of shame and stigma are quite a bit higher. If children with a parent in prison were eligible for pupil premium, yeah, the school could then have the funding to resource this support within the school. And we actually costed it using data that we have from Oxfordshire and then replicating that nationwide. Lots of children with a parent in prison are already eligible for pupil premium funding, just under a different category. And 62% of children already are. So if you were to make children with a parent in prison eligible at the same rate as children with a parent in the military, it would cost less than 25 million a year to fund that entire proposal. So we really strongly believe that this is something which is very achievable and not even expensive, and something that could be implemented right away. And that is our solution. So I will hand back to Sarah now. I think we're going to have some questions. I'm sure there'll be some questions.
Brilliant, thanks, Felix. So we just wanted to have the last bit of the session just opening out to any questions that anybody had or any comments that anyone wanted to make, and we try and answer as best we can.
Well, Sarah, from my point of view, I'd like to thank you and Felix very much for a brilliant presentation. I'd had the opportunity to see snippets of it before, but it's still deeply moving. In fact, I noticed one or two people commenting. It might be quite nice to ask Hetty. You've got a few observations. Hetty Barkworth-Nanton, would you like to comment, please?
Yes. So thank you, Sarah. And Felix, that was brilliant. So a slight disclosure. Children Unseen are a brilliant charity, and actually they partner with the charity I founded, which is the Joanna Simpson Foundation, which looks specifically at the support for children affected by domestic abuse and homicide. Honestly, I think this is just an absolute basic requirement. It's really, really important that we start to look at children from the perspective of children and their needs rather than the system and its needs. At a very basic level, we need to know who they are, but more importantly, we need to make sure that the response is fit for purpose. And I put a comment in there. One of the things we need to broaden this out to slightly as we start to push it forward is that actually we need a whole response where domestic abuse has been the crime, because often when domestic abuse is the crime and the perpetrator goes to prison, the ongoing support for the survivor of domestic abuse is very patchy at best. And actually that survivor being confident and being supported themselves, both as a survivor, but also as the parent of the children that we're talking about, is the most important factor in terms of giving the children the best outcome. So I think where it's domestic abuse, we should think quite seriously about how we join those two dots to get a better outcome overall.
Brilliant, thank you.
Absolutely. I don't know whether you can see it, Sarah and Felix, but there's some interesting stuff in the comments in the chat. I wonder whether Susan or Serena might like to actually talk through the comment that they've made. Susan, to everyone, I don't know your surname. Susan.
King. I'm Susan King. I'm sorry, I can't seem to switch on my camera for some reason. It just won't
It won't play.
Well, your
So,
voice is delightful.
but if you have my audio,
Yeah.
I put 2 comments on there. I was just concerned about. I was concerned about funding because it's the place where things are always stopped. Oh yes, we'd love to do. We appreciate what you're saying, but we don't have the funding for it. And I wondered where the funding came from for the military support, the support for military kids. Does it come under the defence budget, or does it come from schools? Because anything else asked of schools is going to get a no. You know, they're currently overrun with trying to help send kids, well, as we know, they don't have any money. So I was just concerned about funding this fabulous idea.
The children with a parent in the military, in terms of pupil premium, comes through the school's budget. Edward Timpson, when he was an MP, was the one that actually brought it in for children in care when he was a children's minister. And he was absolutely 100% supported behind this idea that actually it needed to be that children were really vulnerable as children in the military. The children in the military get less on pupil premium than children in care do. Do you know what it is, Felix? The amount? It's
£340 per child per year as of this year.
Well, that seems to have a precedent then. It should be, I mean, it's a wonderful idea to bring this into schools. I just saw this sort of barrier of, as always, is cost, isn't it?
It's always cost, but 25 million a year for the government is not their biggest spend, let's say, and also it wouldn't be the first step. It'd be the mechanism to identify and support children through the schools. That's the first step, and then the funding would come after that. And our model school policy would be free to implement, and that would be encouraging, as I said, school staff just to be aware, and that those steps wouldn't actually cost anything.
There's a number of the children we support. So obviously there is the children that have been identified who are living on their own, the small number. But in terms of the data, looking at one of the questions, would be in similar, using it in a similar way to Operation Encompass, that went into the local authority. The local authority then did the check, and then which school were the children at, and to notify the schools. So by going into the local authority, it would notify whether they knew there was an adult in the home and whether they were known to social care already. At the moment with Operation Paramount here in the Thames Valley, it goes into social care. Are they known to social care? But the support we actually do provide. So I think it's a bit about going into schools, but a lot of the support that we offer is very simple. We do an enormous amount of group work, online groups. And it is children being able to meet other children in a similar situation, to actually look at the other child and realise that they're normal. I remember, we provide online support all over the country, and face-to-face support in different areas of the country, but we always try and provide 3 face-to-face supports a year for everybody. But I know when we had an event, I remember a 7-year-old crying when his mother said, "You do realise everybody here has a mummy or a daddy in prison," and actually how overwhelming it was to him to realise. And you just think, well, you're 7, and actually it is really important to know that it's okay and that you're normal. So I think the bit about into schools is simple support. We're not asking schools to do specialist, tailored supports or interventions. They have enough. It's actually to be that safe person within school for children to be able to go to, and maybe to link up with others as well to see that they're not on their own. Here in Oxford, one of the schools recently has actually run a group supported by and facilitated by a young person that we've been supporting. And actually has then been able to have a number of children and young people at that group, and it's together of that feeling of isolation, really. And we all need that sort of sense of self, sense of purpose, and sense of belonging. And I do think within schools would really help. But schools do need to be aware. We ran a competition once about what would it be like to have a parent in prison, and trying to get schools on board, just to empathy from children. And some schools were very, we don't have children like that in our school. And it's like what? This is every background in terms of. So I think we do, we will also have to provide training as well.
Absolutely. Serena, your question.
Thank you. Thank you. So, and thank you, Sarah and Felix, for a very thought-provoking presentation there. I work for a trust in East Anglia with sort of upwards of 70 schools, and I think schools would be very, very keen to have this information, as Sarah has described, you know, because it joins lots and lots of dots for them. Whether there's, you know, funding attached. I think the pupil premium sort of link with children with parents in the forces is a great idea, you know, can just replicate that straight away, but even just as a starting point to have resources and information, I think is really, really crucial. I think schools would be absolutely on board. The point that I made in the chat was about bringing social care on board as well, because it seems to me that, you know, some of the examples you cited were children at risk of, you know, significant harm living alone. But even if not, just the emotional trauma and the processing of the loss of a parent is really crucial. And it seems to me bringing social care on board as well in terms of how they support children and then support schools, and so that it triangulates, you know, that work is really crucial.
Definitely. Yeah.
Great.
Perfect.
Christina, would you like to pose your question, please, or comment?
Yeah, I mean, I know the great work that Sarah and her people do. I've worked alongside their organisation for many years. I think one of the things that I popped in the chat was about, you're absolutely right that we all know, anybody that's been around criminal justice, that the money will not flow through, and finding other ways. And I've made a comment around criminal justice liaison diversion, because as somebody that's managed teams doing that but also delivered that, talking to somebody in a custody suite about who's at home, whatever the offence is less likely to be shared with a police officer than it is somebody that's in the liaison diversion team, and that's already funded by NHS England. So it would be as simple as that being added as the questionnaire, and then processes being put in place. Because and I know you know this, but it's not just parents going to prison, it's also, you know, the chaos that happens when anybody starts in the criminal justice system, be it probation or, you know, all of that thing, and the impact on the children. So I think, and the reducing reoffending, the intergenerational figures also, it's about the sort of the environment that, and you heard it in the video, the environment that children live in, where a parent is involved with crime, and they may not let them go to prison. So I just thought that, I'm sure you probably looked at it, but it's already funded and there's already people having conversations. So I know it's relying on the person arrested to share that information. But my experience is because they're not a police officer and it's not part of their crime, people share a lot with CGL&D staff, and it's funded already. So it was just a thought.
Thank you for that. It's really helpful. Could I just pick up on the comment that is it Beverly Clark in the chat saying most schools, especially at primary, are probably aware. Can I just say, at point of referral to our service, 97% of the families said that their school was not aware that they had a parent in prison. That they were hidden. It would be that they had gone away, or that they were estranged from they had been co-parenting, they weren't actually together anymore, and telling the child not to say anything, or hadn't actually even told the child that they had, and then children finding out in different ways as well. So yeah, for our experiences haven't been that schools know. And obviously the children we support, it could be different, because for us to try and manage our capacity at the moment, we are really struggling as an organisation to manage the numbers. We just haven't got the funding to do it. We only take self-referrals. So obviously there are going to be families more motivated in actually being able to have those conversations. But yeah, 97% when we did a snapshot of point of referral said that school didn't know. And obviously then we can support them in terms of having conversations to tell school. And a deputy head teacher of a very large state school a couple of weeks ago said, how would he know that they had got children with a parent in prison in the school? And we were like, well, unless they tell you, you won't know. But they had assumed that there would be some automatic way of the school knowing. And of course there isn't.
Hetty. Hetty, you
Yeah,
raised
yeah. I'm just unmuting myself and unvideoing myself. It's just a thought, and I think I know the answer, but isn't there a role for the criminal justice system here, and ultimately potentially a judge, whereby if somebody gets convicted and gets given a prison sentence, isn't there a duty of care at that point to be asking the questions about, whether there are children affected and what's being done about that? I mean, that's the point where you can ultimately catch it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You may have seen a very interesting point by Hamad in the chat, and I wonder if you'd like to explore that a bit further. Hamad, are you on screen?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Yeah.
You hear me? Yes.
Please, we'd love to hear your comment. Nice to see you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your presentation. And I live in Canada, but I remotely work for Iran, and but most of the challenge that you provided here was really similar. I had one comment and one question. The comments were just maybe you mentioned or you have already a plan for that. Just want to be to clear it. Don't you think it's the identification of the children who have the arrested person who have children should be at the time of arrest, even if when they have a plan for arrest someone and can't identify if they have a children or not, at least they could be trained if children surrounded, how they can react and have someone around to make sure that children not left alone, not to leave it for the time of they got to the prison or the jail or somewhere. And my other question was about the role of media. And you mentioned in your presentation and in the stories shared by the adults who have this experience. Some of them mentioned that media tell their stories not from their eyes, but about their parents, and everybody knows their names, their address, and the stigma around them is more severe. Do you have any plan or positive experience to engage and train the media and engage them to play a positive role in to mitigate stigma and support play as a support for children? Thank you.
In terms of the arrest, you're right. I mean, it is a huge safeguarding issue, I think, in terms of children being there and witnessing that arrest. And that we, have many different stories of it being quite horrendous and traumatizing for the children having witnessed that. In fact, the little boy in the police raid there, he was only visiting his father every other week, and I'm pretty sure that the arrest would be that they knew that he would actually be at home, and 2 years on he was still wetting the bed and having to sleep with his mother. I think they are, he is a casualty of his father offending, but also in terms of what had happened with the police for him. So absolutely, definitely, I just think one of the things that we try and mitigate in terms of that afterwards with police is at our residential, we have really good relationships in terms of West Midlands Violence Reduction Unit and the Thames Valley Violence Reduction Unit, is them coming out in the summer when children come and having the car and talking to police officers. But obviously for children that trauma has happened. The media, definitely, in terms of it is really difficult that the addresses are in the press, and yet that parent is probably on remand. But yet, Joe Smith, that, you know, Barrow Close is there, and the Smith children are the ones having to suffer because of the address being given. You know, we've had examples of vigilantes breaking actually into the house. The person that has committed the offence, the offender isn't in the house, but the children are in the house, the mother's in the house. Traumatizing, absolutely frightening. Windows being put in, you know, everything going on by it being in the press. And what they say is, when we challenge it, is that the public have a right to know who the offender was, and that's why they actually give the name and the road. But again, it's another safeguarding issue in terms of for the children who haven't done anything wrong. And when families realise what's going to happen, we tend to have a significant amount of families that we support that have the parent has committed a significant long-term offence. We know it's going to be in the media. The ones that prepare are changing their names and moving before it happens. But that's having the wherewithal to know that's going to happen. And for families that don't know that's going to happen, actually having to, you know, have, I mean, just horrendous stuff happen to them through no fault of their own. So yeah, everything that you say, 100% agree. But it is, how do we change those narratives? How do we collectively all come together to challenge this, really?
Yeah, I can't thank you enough for this. If there are any further questions, please put them through. For those of you who are a bit unfamiliar with the Leaders Club, it's coming up to its 17th year. I started in 2008, and as you may have gathered from some of the spiel there, I served as a magistrate for 34 years, including chairing the Wirral Bench for 3 of them. So I'm used to that side. Had the privilege of chairing the Magistrates Association for Merseyside as well. Within the Leaders Club, we have a Law and Justice Forum with some eminent people, and I want to try and build on that further, and also health and social care, areas of great interest. And those of you who are new to the club, the one thing in registering for tonight, I put you on the mailing list, unsubscribe at any time, but you'll see the general gist of things that we do. And Sarah and Felix's presentation tonight typifies it. Brilliant presentation from 2 brilliant people talking about something, a really serious, challenging topic. And I'm hugely grateful for the 2 of you. The general election's just been called at the wrong time, and I would like to have the confidence that the Labour Party, a Labour Party, will get this show back on the road, because that presentation that was given with a 10-minute bill was forceful, relevant and poignant. Fingers crossed, but that sounds ridiculous. Can I just ask you, please, Rosemary, you've raised your hand. Is there a question you want to pose before I do a final vote of thanks?
Stephen, are you talking to me?
Yes, you've raised your hand, my dear.
Right. Yes, I saw that very quickly. I want to say, actually, thank you for the presentation. I am extremely friendly with 2 teachers and 1 deputy head teacher of our area. You will know them well, Stephen, but I won't say that. And I will directly tell them about this particular presentation, because this is where it all starts, and this is where they need help. So thank you so much for the presentation, and I will help by doing that. I'm too old to do anything else, but that's it, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed.
You remain wonderful. The great thing is...
Can I just say one thing to you all, is that please just have conversations with people and say, what do you think happens when a parent goes to prison? And so many people will say that social care will get involved or children will be supported. And it is, the more that we can keep all having these conversations, the better, really. And also, if anyone does have any time, do listen again on Women's Hour. Women's Hour this week has all been about children with the parent in prison, but focusing on the child and the family left behind, not on the person in prison. On Monday was Kerry, a young woman who was literally left on her own when her parent went to prison, and in fact was one of our mentors who's mentored a young person who was also left on her own when her father went to prison. On Tuesday, myself and Lucy Baldwin, a criminologist. Today was a grandmother that we supported in the pandemic, talking about what that experience is like. Tomorrow is Emily, who was a victim of domestic abuse, and it was her husband husband that she went down for the offences against her, talking about her experiences. And on Friday, they've been trying to get a minister in to talk about the issues. As yet, they haven't. I think it's going to be 2 MPs because there isn't a minister. But please do listen to that programme, because it does actually sort of cover all the different issues. And for once, it's a programme that's about the child and the family and not the person inside.
And to everyone here, you notice we've recorded the event. You will all, everyone who's registered, and the 100 people registered for tonight, will receive a recording of this. But through Sarah, it will go onto YouTube. So I hope this will give another opportunity for others to hear and appreciate children heard and seen. At least we've heard and seen 2 brilliant presenters. So can I ask you to unmute yourself and give them both a real round of applause, please?
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for your time, and everyone else. It's been good to meet you if it's for the first time, and I hope we will see you again. But again, to Sarah and Felix, thank you very much indeed for giving an hour of your valuable time.
Thank you for having us. It's great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.